Something extraordinary appeared in our solar system on July 1st, 2025, and what happened next would shake the foundations of everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe. On October 3rd, NASA's Perseverance rover captured images from Mars, faint, unclear, but unmistakable. An amateur astrophotographer named Simeon Schmaus took those 20 raw images, stacked them together, and there it was, a subtle smudge of light in the constellation Corona Borealis, exactly where the interstellar visitor known as 3I/Atlas should have been. People began talking, analyzing, debating, but here's where things took a strange turn. That very same day, 15,000 NASA employees were suddenly sent home. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, equipped with a high-resolution camera 30 times more powerful than anything Perseverance could offer, was positioned perfectly for the shot of a lifetime. The European Space Agency's Mars Express and ExoMars orbiters were watching too, their instruments trained on this mysterious visitor from beyond our solar system. So where are those images? Why the deafening silence from the world's leading space agencies? Before we dive deeper into this mystery, I need you to do something important. If you find this investigation fascinating, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications because what we're about to reveal will challenge everything you think you know about what's happening in our skies. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from, what time it is in your location, and most importantly, what you honestly think this object really is, a natural comet from another star system or something far more significant. Understanding this content is crucial because the implications reach far beyond astronomy. They touch on transparency, government disclosure, and our readiness for contact with intelligence beyond Earth. Share this investigation on your social media platforms with your friends, with anyone who cares about the truth. We're building a community of informed individuals who refuse to accept silence when answers are demanded. Now, let me take you back to August of 2025, months before most of the world had even heard the name 3I/Atlas. Remote viewers, individuals trained in the controversial practice of perceiving distant targets through extrasensory means, detected something shocking about this object. They described technology aboard the visitor, a thumb drive-sized device deliberately embedded inside what appeared to be an ancient comet, broadcasting impulses across the void of space. These remote viewers made these claims months before any telescope detected the chemical impossibilities that would later baffle scientists worldwide. This wasn't guesswork after the fact. This was specific, detailed information provided before the mainstream scientific community had any reason to question what 3I/Atlas truly was. The story of 3I/Atlas begins with numbers that simply don't make sense. When astronomers first calculated the mass and trajectory of this object, alarm bells should have been ringing in every observatory on the planet. Let me walk you through 7 statistical impossibilities, 7 characteristics so improbable that their simultaneous occurrence in a single object defies reasonable explanation through natural causes alone. The first impossibility is the mass problem. Based on the brightness of 3I/Atlas and assuming all that light came from reflected sunlight, scientists calculated the object should measure between 10 and 20 kilometers across. That's enormous for an interstellar visitor. For context, Oumuamua, the first confirmed interstellar object discovered in 2017, measured barely 100 meters in length. The second interstellar comet, 2I/Borisov, was less than 1 kilometer in diameter. Yet here comes 3I/Atlas, appearing to be orders of magnitude more massive than either of its predecessors. Statistical models that predict how many interstellar objects we should detect are crystal clear. Small objects should be common, while large objects are extraordinarily rare. We should have detected hundreds, perhaps thousands, of Oumuamua-sized visitors before stumbling across something the scale of 3I/Atlas. The probability of discovering an object this large before finding its smaller cousins? Roughly 1 in 10,000, or 0.01%. But the story gets stranger when we examine the object's trajectory. Over 4,100 measurements from 227 observatories worldwide tracked 3I/Atlas between May and September of 2025. When scientists compared the object's actual path to what pure gravitational models predicted, they found almost no deviation. Think about what that means. This object is hemorrhaging material, losing 150 kilograms of gas and dust every single second as solar radiation heats its surface. That kind of outgassing creates thrust, a rocket effect that should push the object noticeably off course, like a balloon releasing air and zigzagging across a room. Every comet ever observed shows this non-gravitational acceleration. Except 3I/Atlas barely budges from its predicted path. The only way to explain this is if the object possesses enormous mass. A nucleus so incredibly heavy that even the constant jetting of 150 kilograms per second cannot measurably alter its trajectory. Calculations suggest a mass exceeding 33 billion tons, with a diameter larger than 5 kilometers. That makes 3I/Atlas roughly 1 million times more massive than Oumuamua. 1 million times. The scale difference is like comparing a grain of sand to a boulder the size of a house. The second impossibility involves something that has never been documented in the entire history of comet observations: the sunward glow. On July 21, 2025, the Hubble Space Telescope captured the highest resolution image yet of 3I/Atlas. Scientists analyzing that image noticed scattered light extending roughly twice as far toward the sun as it did in the opposite direction. This violates one of the most fundamental, reliable rules in planetary science. Comets develop tails that point away from the sun because radiation pressure from sunlight pushes dust particles outward into space. This principle has been confirmed by thousands upon thousands of observations over centuries. It's not a theory, it's an observed fact as reliable as gravity itself. Yet 3I/Atlas appears to be violating this principle. The extension wasn't subtle or ambiguous. It showed a 10-to-1 ratio, 10 times longer toward the sun than away from it. And because the image captured the object edge-on, the true elongation becomes even more extreme when you account for viewing geometry. Scientists Avi Loeb and Eric Keating published a paper proposing that this could happen if the object sheds large ice fragments specifically from its sun-facing side, and those fragments survive longer because of their size, creating an extended distribution of material in the solar direction. The physics works on paper. The mathematics check out. But the conditions required are incredibly specific and narrow: ice fragments of precisely the right size, ejected at exactly the right velocities, under particular conditions of solar heating, with evaporation rates calibrated just so that fragments survive long enough to create the observed pattern. It's theoretically possible in the same way that flipping a coin 50 consecutive times and getting heads every single time is possible. The laws of probability don't forbid it, but when you actually see it happen, you start wondering if someone weighted the coin. The third impossibility is perhaps the most disturbing from a scientific standpoint: the industrial fingerprint. In late August and early September, the Very Large Telescope in Chile trained its sensitive spectrograph on 3I/Atlas and detected something that stopped researchers in their tracks: nickel atoms in the gas plume, lots of nickel, increasing exponentially as the object approached the sun, rising according to a power law of roughly 9. But here's the problem that no natural explanation can adequately address. They detected almost no iron. In every natural environment we've ever studied, supernovae, planetary cores, meteorites, asteroids, comets, nickel and iron are created together and remain bonded together. They're forged in the same stellar explosions, bound in the same minerals, released into space as an inseparable pair. Every meteorite ever analyzed shows nickel and iron in predictable ratios. Every asteroid maintains this relationship. 2I/Borisov, the previous interstellar comet, displayed perfectly normal nickel-to-iron ratios consistent with formation in another stellar system. Solar system comets all show the expected proportions. There is no known natural process occurring at the temperatures 3I/Atlas experiences that can separate these elements, except industrial refinement. On Earth, we separate nickel from iron every single day. High-purity nickel production for electronics, specialized alloys, and applications where iron contamination would cause problems requires removing iron through smelting and chemical processing. The process leaves an unmistakable signature: nickel without iron. The scientists who published this data from the Very Large Telescope tried every natural explanation they could conceive. Perhaps unusual chemical pathways in exotic ices. Perhaps minerals formed under conditions we've never encountered before. Perhaps dust-grain physics operating in ways we don't fully understand. Every hypothesis ran headlong into the same insurmountable wall. The temperature is far too low, and the environment is completely wrong for any of these processes to occur naturally. This should not be happening. Yet it is happening, and the nickel production isn't static or random. It increases with decreasing distance from the sun, exponentially, following a clear power law. Every time the object moves 10% closer to the sun, nickel output climbs steeply. This isn't random outgassing from a comet. This is a process systematically ramping up as solar energy increases, almost as if something is powering on, drawing energy from the intensifying sunlight. The fourth impossibility comes from polarization measurements that literally don't exist in any catalog of natural objects. When sunlight scatters off particles, it becomes polarized. The direction and degree of polarization reveal the size, shape, and composition of those particles. Scientists have measured polarization signatures from hundreds of comets and asteroids. The patterns are well understood and remarkably consistent. 3I/Atlas showed a polarization signature of -2.77% at a phase angle of approximately 7 degrees, with an inversion angle of only 17 degrees. This specific combination has never been measured in any asteroid or comet, whether from our solar system or interstellar space. The closest matches aren't comets at all. They're trans-Neptunian objects and a specific centaur named Pholus, icy bodies from the frigid outer reaches of the solar system with completely different compositions and formation histories than typical comets. A scientific paper submitted to the Astrophysical Journal Letters concluded that 3I/Atlas may represent a distinct type of comet, expanding the diversity of known interstellar bodies. Distinct type is diplomatic scientific language meaning. We have no category for this object. It doesn't fit anywhere in our existing classification systems. The fifth impossibility is the ecliptic alignment. Our solar system is essentially flat. The planets orbit in a plane called the ecliptic, like grooves on a record. Random objects arriving from interstellar space come from random directions, crossing that plane at random angles determined by the chaotic gravitational history of their journey through the galaxy. The probability of an interstellar visitor's orbit aligning within 5 degrees of the ecliptic is roughly 0.2%, 1 in 500. 3I/Atlas arrived aligned within 5 degrees of the ecliptic plane. Not only that, but it's moving retrograde, traveling opposite to the direction planets orbit around the sun. This combination creates the ideal trajectory if your goal was to conduct a reconnaissance survey of multiple planets with minimum course corrections and maximum efficiency. It's the path you would choose if you were designing an interstellar probe intended to gather data on as many worlds as possible during a single pass through an alien solar system. The sixth impossibility involves timing so precise it strains the boundaries of coincidence. 3I/Atlas will pass relatively close to 3 different planets during its flyby. Venus at 0.65 astronomical units, Mars at 19 cents, and Jupiter at 36 cents. The probability of a random interstellar visitor arriving with timing that allows close approaches to 3 different planets is approximately 0.005%, 1 in 20,000. If you were an advanced civilization sending a probe to study a distant planetary system, this is exactly the trajectory you would engineer. one that brings your spacecraft within observation range of multiple diverse worlds, from rocky inner planets to gas giants, maximizing your scientific return on investment. The seventh and perhaps most chilling impossibility is the connection to one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. On August 15, 1977, the Big Ear radio telescope at Ohio State University detected a narrowband signal at 1420.4 MHz, the hydrogen line, the universal frequency any technological civilization would use if they wanted to be heard across interstellar distances. The signal lasted exactly 72 seconds, the precise duration Big Ear's beam would take to sweep across a stationary source as Earth rotated. The signal was powerful, 30 times louder than background noise. On the computer printout, the intensity values climbed from normal 1s and 2s up through 5s and 6s, peaking at the letter U, the highest value the system could display before running out of alphanumeric characters. Astronomer Jerry Emmons saw those climbing values and wrote one word in the margin: "Wow!" They searched for the signal again. For years, for decades, the Big Ear telescope pointed at that same patch of sky hundreds of times. Other observatories joined the hunt. The signal never repeated. After a while, it became astronomy's most famous mystery. Evidence of nothing, proof of nothing, but impossible to forget. Now trace 3I/Atlas backward through space and time. Account for its velocity of 60 kilometers per second relative to the Sun. Map its trajectory through the galaxy, calculating where it would have been on that August night in 1977. The answer: roughly 600 astronomical units from Earth, 90 billion kilometers away, and positioned within 9 degrees of the WOW signal's origin point. At that distance, to produce a signal as strong as what Big Ear detected would require a transmitter outputting between 0.5 gigawatt and 2 gigawatts of sustained power. That's not a battery. That's not a chemical generator. That's a nuclear reactor, operating continuously, focusing its output into a beam narrow and powerful enough to reach across 90 billion kilometers of space and still register 30 times above background noise when it finally reached Earth. Could a comet do that? Not with any physics we understand. Comets don't generate gigawatts of power. They don't emit coherent radio signals. They certainly don't broadcast at the exact frequency that happens to be the universal marker for technological civilizations searching for each other across the cosmic void. But an object designed to announce itself, a probe that needed to signal its presence before entering the inner solar system where observation would become easier, that would broadcast exactly this way: one strong, unmistakable pulse, then silence, because you wouldn't want to give away your position and trajectory until you were ready to be fully observed and understood. 7 anomalies. 7 statistical longshots. 7 characteristics that each require special pleading to explain naturally. And we're being asked to believe they all occurred simultaneously in the same object purely by chance. At what point does Occam's razor, the principle that the simplest explanation is usually correct, start cutting in a different direction? At what point do we admit that the simplest explanation might not be natural but extraordinarily unusual, but rather artificial and deliberately designed? That question is what scientists are wrestling with right now as 3I/Atlas moves through a region of space where no telescope on Earth can observe it. Because between early October and December of 2025, this mysterious visitor is hidden behind the Sun, completely obscured from our view, traveling through the one location in our solar system where its actions cannot be monitored, recorded, or verified. And the timing of that obscuration raises questions that demand answers. Let me take you deeper into what happened on October 3, 2025, because the implications extend far beyond astronomy into questions of government transparency and the public's right to know what's happening in our own cosmic neighborhood. October 3rd was supposed to be historic, the day humanity received its closest, clearest look at an interstellar visitor. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter was positioned perfectly, its high-rise camera capable of resolution 30 times better than anything the Hubble Space Telescope could achieve from Earth orbit. The European Space Agency's Mars Express and ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter stood ready with full instrument suites. Multiple spacecraft, multiple viewing angles, the highest resolution imaging ever achieved of an object from beyond our solar system. Then, at the exact moment when the world needed NASA most, when every eye should have been trained on this unprecedented event, 83% of the agency vanished. 15,000 civil servants sent home, furloughed, told not to come to work during what should have been the most intensive observation campaign in the history of interstellar astronomy. The official explanation was straightforward. Federal government shutdown, budget impasse, unfortunate timing, nothing to do with 3I/Atlas, just bad luck. But think about the odds. 3I/Atlas was discovered in July of 2025. The Mars flyby date was known and planned for months in advance. Scientists understood this would be their only opportunity to capture high-resolution images before the object disappeared behind the sun for 3 months. NASA knew. Yes, they knew. Every space agency on Earth knew. And in the final week before closest approach, the United States government shut down. NASA's official website stopped updating. Press releases ceased. The vast army of scientists who should have been frantically analyzing data, processing images, making discoveries, checking calculations, they were sent home. Only essential personnel remained. A skeleton crew maintaining critical operations to keep the International Space Station functioning and astronauts safe. But here's what exposes the official narrative as incomplete at best. Raw image feeds from the Perseverance rover kept uploading throughout the shutdown. The rover didn't stop working. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter didn't stop working. The cameras remained active. The instruments continued collecting data. Telemetry flowed back to Earth as it always does. The data was being recorded. It just wasn't being processed, analyzed, or released to the public. And that silence has continued long past the end of the government shutdown. Raw Perseverance images are publicly available on NASA servers. They upload automatically, part of the agency's transparency commitment. Simeon Schmaus, an amateur astrophotographer with no access to classified systems or insider information, downloaded 20 of those raw images, stacked them using publicly available software to reduce noise, and found what he described as a faint smudge in the constellation Corona Borealis, close to where 3I/Atlas should have been based on orbital calculations. A faint smudge. That's what we, the public, received from humanity's closest encounter with an interstellar visitor, from spacecraft capable of resolving features smaller than a car on the Martian surface. We got a faint smudge processed by an amateur in his spare time. Unless, of course, the professional instruments saw something else entirely, something requiring careful consideration, analysis, and high-level discussions before release to a public unprepared for what the images might reveal. The European Space Agency released a statement confirming that Mars Express and ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter successfully observed 3I/Atlas during the October 1st through 7th flyby window. Instruments including the high-resolution stereo camera, the color and stereo surface imaging system, and multiple spectrometers collected data. That data would be analyzed in coming weeks, they said. Results would be published when ready. No images. No preliminary findings. No excitement about capturing unprecedented views of an interstellar object at closest range. Just a dry, bureaucratic confirmation that observations occurred, followed by silence that has now stretched for months. China's Tianwen-1 mission at Mars said nothing. The UAE's Hope orbiter said nothing. Every spacecraft in orbit around Mars had been watching, and every space agency on Earth has gone conspicuously quiet. You don't need to embrace conspiracy theories to find this troubling. You simply need to remember what happened with 2I/Borisov, the previous interstellar comet that passed through our solar system in 2019. When Borisov arrived, images flooded out immediately. Scientists were enthusiastic and vocal. Press releases flew from observatories worldwide. The astronomical community celebrated openly. It was treated exactly as you'd expect. A rare visitor from beyond our solar system, worthy of intense study and public engagement. Borisov was exciting because it came from interstellar space, but it wasn't anomalous. It behaved like a normal comet. The right chemistry, the expected tail structure, standard outgassing patterns. It was interesting without being threatening to established scientific understanding. 3I/Atlas gets silence. The difference, perhaps, is that 2I/Borisov didn't challenge our fundamental assumptions about what comets should be. It didn't exhibit 7 simultaneous statistical impossibilities. It didn't show nickel without iron, a sunward glowing tail, polarization signatures with no natural analog, or perfect alignment with the WOW signal's origin. It didn't require us to question whether we were looking at something natural or something else entirely. As 3I/Atlas disappeared behind the sun in early October, beginning 3 months of total obscuration from Earth-based observation, the silence from official channels deepened into something that feels less like scientific caution and more like institutional paralysis. Amateur astronomers posted their final images before the object vanished from view. Scientists published papers carefully worded, technically precise, meticulously avoiding speculation beyond what the data strictly supported. And 15,000 NASA employees waited to be called back to work, wondering what their colleagues with essential status had seen in those Mars orbiter images that the public has still not been shown. Here's what makes the silence even more suspicious. This isn't the first time government agencies have been accused of withholding information about unidentified objects exhibiting unusual characteristics. On September 9, 2025, just weeks before the 3I/Atlas Mars flyby and the subsequent NASA shutdown, Congressman Eric Burleson of Missouri walked into a House Oversight Committee hearing and played video footage that nobody in the public had previously seen. The footage, dated October 30, 2024, shows a bright spherical object moving against a dark background. Then suddenly, a Hellfire missile enters the frame, heading directly toward the object. The missile strikes. What happens next defies everything we understand about kinetic weapons and the laws of physics. The object doesn't explode. It doesn't fragment or tumble. It doesn't even appear to slow down. The missile seemingly bounces off and continues on a separate trajectory while the spherical object keeps flying as if nothing happened. That's a Hellfire missile smacking into that UFO and just bouncing right off, Burleson said, narrating the video for the committee. And it kept going. He paused, letting the implications sink in, then asked the question that has echoed through defense and intelligence circles ever since. I'm not going to speculate what it is, but the question is, why are we being blocked from this information consistently? The video was captured by an MQ-9 Reaper drone operating off the coast of Yemen in a combat zone where U.S. Navy ships and aircraft were actively protecting commercial shipping lanes from missiles and drones fired by Houthi militants. American forces were regularly intercepting and destroying threats in that region using precisely the kind of Hellfire missiles shown in the footage. But this object didn't behave like any drone, missile, or known aircraft. And it certainly didn't respond to a Hellfire strike the way any physical object should. When journalists asked the Department of Defense to authenticate the video and provide details about the incident, when it occurred, where exactly it happened, what the object was, whether additional footage existed, the Pentagon offered a response that has become distressingly familiar. We do not have anything to provide on this. A separate DoD spokesperson added, I have nothing for you. Not, we're investigating. Not, the footage is classified pending review. Just, we have nothing. As if the video the entire committee had just watched, captured by U.S. military hardware during active operations, simply didn't exist in any official capacity. The Yemen video wasn't the only revelation at that September hearing. Multiple military veterans testified under oath about their own encounters with unidentified anomalous phenomena. the government's current sanitized term for what used to be called UFOs, a rebranding clearly designed to distance the topic from decades of science fiction baggage and public ridicule. Air Force veteran Dylan Rowan described an incident from 2012 when he stepped outside for a cigarette break during an overnight shift at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia, one of the most secure military installations in the United States. A triangular aircraft hovered directly above him, silent and motionless, for several minutes. Then, according to Rowan's sworn testimony, the object rapidly ascended to commercial jet altitude and departed the area at what he described as a high rate of speed that no conventional aircraft could match. Rowan didn't keep his experience secret. He reported the incident through proper military channels, exactly as regulations require. He was interviewed by AARO, the Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, in 2023. But instead of his report being taken seriously and investigated thoroughly, Rowan claims it was dismissed outright. Worse, he alleges he faced workplace retaliation, manipulation of his security clearance status, and blacklisting that prevented him from obtaining employment at federal intelligence agencies despite his pristine service record and relevant qualifications. His testimony painted a disturbing picture of a system that doesn't merely fail to properly investigate UAP encounters. It actively punishes military personnel who come forward with information, sending a clear message to others. Keep your mouth shut if you value your career. The September hearing wasn't just about individual sightings or isolated incidents. It was about systemic transparency failure and the government's apparent unwillingness to inform the American public about phenomena occurring in controlled military airspace, captured by sophisticated sensors, witnessed by trained observers, and documented with data that should, by law, be subject to congressional oversight. Representative Anna Paulina Luna, who chairs the UAP task force, opened the session with a statement that cut to the heart of the matter. For too long, the issue of unidentified anomalous phenomena has been shrouded in secrecy, stigma, and in some cases outright dismissal. This is about national security, government accountability, and the American people's right to the truth. Here's what makes this moment fundamentally different from decades of UFO speculation, conspiracy theories, and blurry photographs that could be explained as weather balloons, birds, or camera artifacts. The witnesses aren't fringe figures with questionable credibility. They're military personnel with spotless service records, active security clearances, and first-hand operational experience in high-stakes environments. The footage isn't grainy cell phone video recorded by someone's cousin from a backyard in rural nowhere. It's sensor data from advanced military platforms, captured during active operations in contested airspace by systems designed specifically to identify and track objects. And the resistance to disclosure isn't coming from shadowy cabals meeting in secret. It's coming from official Pentagon offices, from agencies that are theoretically supposed to be investigating these incidents and reporting findings to Congress and the public. ARO has consistently maintained that it has no verifiable evidence of extraterrestrial activity or technology. The agency claims to employ what it calls a rigorous scientific framework and data-driven approach to better understand UAP. But critics increasingly point out that many of the most compelling cases, including the Yemen incident and the Langley AFB sighting, seem to be explained away using logic that doesn't withstand scrutiny, or more commonly, simply aren't explained at all. They're dismissed, ignored, or buried under classification protocols that conveniently prevent independent verification. Take the infamous Go Fast video from 2015, which appeared to show a rapidly moving object flying at high speed above ocean waves off the California coast. After years of speculation and analysis by independent researchers, ARO analysts eventually determined it was likely an optical illusion involving a weather balloon, claiming the apparent high speed was due to parallax effects and the angle from which the Navy F/A-18's camera viewed a slow-moving object. But pilots who witnessed these objects in person, not merely on infrared sensors, insist the official explanations don't match their direct experiences. They saw these objects maneuvering in ways that violate known principles of aerodynamics, exhibiting acceleration and directional changes that would generate g-forces fatal to any biological pilot and damaging to any conventional aircraft structure. Some analysts have suggested the Yemen orb might also be a balloon drifting in high-altitude winds, highly reflective and catching sunlight. The theory is that it only appeared to be moving rapidly because of parallax motion as the drone's camera tracked it. And the missile? Perhaps it simply missed, and the viewing angle created the illusion of a direct hit when in reality the warhead passed harmlessly by. But former senior intelligence official Luis Elizondo, who testified at the September hearing and previously ran the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, pushed back forcefully against that explanation. "We've never seen a Hellfire missile hit a target and bounce off," he stated matter-of-factly. "When a Hellfire makes a kinetic strike on something solid, there's typically not much left of whatever it hit. It's a very, very destructive weapon system." If you've been paying attention, you're asking yourself the same question. Where exactly does this leave us? Either the United States military encountered something with technology far beyond anything in our current arsenals, technology capable of withstanding a direct strike from one of our most effective anti-armor missiles and continuing to operate as if nothing happened, or there's a mundane, prosaic explanation that officials are refusing to share publicly for reasons we can only speculate about, none of which inspire confidence in governmental transparency. Neither possibility is particularly comforting. The first implies we're not alone and whatever is visiting doesn't consider our weapons a threat. The second implies a level of institutional dysfunction and deliberate obfuscation that should concern every citizen who believes democratic governance requires an informed public. And these aren't isolated incidents buried in decades-old files. The National UFO Reporting Center logged over 2,000 UAP sightings in just the first 6 months of 2025 alone, a statistically significant increase over previous years that cannot be explained by heightened attention or reporting bias alone. The Pentagon acknowledged receiving more than 750 new UAP reports between May 2023 and June 2024. Whatever is happening in our skies is happening with increasing frequency, witnessed by growing numbers of people, documented by increasingly sophisticated technology, and stubbornly resistant to conventional explanation. Now connect these dots to 3I/Atlas. An object arrives from interstellar space exhibiting 7 statistical impossibilities. Remote viewers describe technology embedded within it months before scientific instruments detect anomalous chemistry. It broadcasts at precisely the frequency and from exactly the location we'd expect if it were the source of the 1977 WOW signal. It follows a trajectory optimized for planetary reconnaissance. And at the exact moment when we should have received our closest, clearest images of this object, NASA experiences a shutdown, 15,000 employees are sent home, and the high-resolution photographs that could answer fundamental questions remain unreleased months later. Meanwhile, military personnel testify under oath about objects in our own atmosphere that ignore our weapons, violate physics as we understand it, and operate with apparent impunity in some of the most heavily monitored airspace on the planet. The government's response to both situations follows the same pattern. Acknowledge that something happened, provide minimal information, offer explanations that don't quite fit the facts, then stonewall any further inquiry under the banner of national security, ongoing investigations, or simple bureaucratic indifference. I want to be absolutely clear about something before we go further. I'm not claiming to know with certainty what 3I/Atlas is. I'm not telling you it's definitely an alien probe, or that the government is covering up irrefutable evidence of extraterrestrial contact. What I am saying, what the evidence clearly demonstrates, is that we are not being told the full truth about what is happening. The data doesn't add up. The official explanations require us to accept a cascade of unlikely coincidences. The pattern of information suppression suggests something more significant is occurring than simple bureaucratic caution or scientific rigor. The question isn't whether you believe in aliens or subscribe to conspiracy theories. The question is whether you believe the public has a right to know what governments discover when they point their most sophisticated instruments at mysterious objects, whether those objects come from beyond our solar system or operate in our own airspace. The question is whether transparency and democratic accountability matter, or whether we've collectively decided that certain kinds of knowledge are too dangerous, too destabilizing, or too inconvenient to share with the citizens who fund the agencies doing the discovering. October 29, 2025 represents a critical threshold in this unfolding mystery. That's the date 3I/Atlas reaches perihelion, its closest approach to the Sun. At a distance of roughly 1.4 astronomical units, just inside the orbit of Mars, this interstellar visitor will experience conditions that will, in the words of Avi Loeb, elicit confessions. High-stress environments force truth. When you heat ice, it cannot pretend to be anything other than ice. When you heat metal, it behaves according to the laws of thermodynamics and materials science. And when you heat something that appears to be a comet but might be something else entirely, the disguise inevitably cracks. Imagine standing in front of an industrial blast furnace, feeling the heat radiating from molten metal. Now multiply that thermal energy by factors you cannot easily comprehend. That's what perihelion means for an object coming in from the frigid darkness of interstellar space where temperatures hover just a few degrees above absolute zero. Sunlight pounds the surface with gigawatts of electromagnetic radiation. Not metaphorical energy, but actual measurable power output equivalent to what runs cities, captured and absorbed by every square meter of surface area facing our star. There are two fundamentally different scenarios for what happens at perihelion, and they could not be more divergent in their implications. In scenario 1, 3I/Atlas is exactly what mainstream scientists cautiously suggest it might be: an unusually massive, chemically peculiar, statistically improbable comet, but ultimately a natural object nonetheless. In this scenario, October 29th marks the beginning of spectacular activity visible from Earth once the object emerges from behind the solar glare in December. Surface temperatures skyrocket. Volatiles that have remained frozen and dormant for billions of years suddenly find themselves subjected to intense solar radiation. Carbon dioxide sublimates directly from solid to gas. Water ice transforms to vapor, bypassing the liquid phase entirely in the vacuum of space. Dust particles embedded in the ice are lifted off in enormous expanding plumes, creating the classic cometary coma and tail structure. We've witnessed this process countless times with solar system comets approaching the Sun. They become magnificent, developing tails millions of kilometers long, brightening dramatically by factors of 10 or more, occasionally fragmenting under thermal and tidal stresses as their loosely bound structures prove unable to withstand the violence of perihelion passage. It's chaotic, spectacular, and utterly beautiful. If 3I/Atlas is natural, we should observe something similar: a massive outburst of gas and dust, dramatic increases in brightness measured by observers worldwide, the development of a proper classical cometary tail streaming behind the object as radiation pressure does its work pushing material away from the Sun. And if the object is as fragile as some planetary scientists suspect, if that 5-kilometer estimated diameter consists mostly of loosely aggregated ice and dust rather than solid rock, perihelion might literally tear it apart. We could watch in real time as an interstellar visitor disintegrates into fragments that gradually disperse along its orbital path, giving astronomers an unprecedented opportunity to study the internal composition and structure of a comet from another star system. That would be scientifically extraordinary even if it destroys the very object we're studying, answering fundamental questions about comet formation processes, about the chemical and isotopic composition of planetary systems beyond our own, about the mechanisms that fling objects into interstellar space in the first place. But then there is scenario 2, And this is where the conversation shifts from conventional astronomy into territory that makes establishment scientists profoundly uncomfortable. In scenario 2, 3I/Atlas is not natural. The anomalies are not statistical flukes or coincidences. The nickel without iron, the sunward-pointing tail, the perfect ecliptic alignment, the wow signal connection, they all mean exactly what they appear to mean. This is an artificial object, and perihelion is not about thermal stress testing. It's about activation. Think about what you would design if you were tasked with sending a probe to study a distant star system, something that needed to survive an interstellar journey lasting not years or decades but potentially millions of years. The probe would need protection from cosmic radiation, from micrometeoroid impacts, from the slow degradation inflicted by time itself. Encasing it in ice makes perfect engineering sense. Ice is abundant in the outer reaches of any planetary system, easy to accumulate, naturally protective, and most importantly, it makes your probe virtually indistinguishable from the countless natural comets drifting through space. It's camouflage that requires no active systems, no power consumption, no maintenance. It just works. But once that probe reaches the inner regions of the target solar system, once it approaches the host star where conditions allow for detailed observation and where any indigenous technological civilization would be most likely to develop, it needs to wake up. It needs power to run instruments, to process data, to transmit findings. And there's only one power source reliably available in any star system: the star itself. Perihelion, in this scenario, is not a stress test. It's a charging station, a predetermined point where solar panels, thermoelectric generators, or even more exotic energy harvesting systems can draw maximum power from the star's radiation, converting photons into electricity to run systems that have been dormant throughout the long cold journey. Avi Loeb has laid out the possibilities with characteristic mathematical precision in multiple papers and interviews. One option is a solar Oberth maneuver, a real technique used by our own space missions. The spacecraft dives close to the star, uses its immense gravitational field to accelerate dramatically, and alters trajectory with minimal fuel expenditure. It's the most efficient method known to physics for changing course within a solar system. The optimal point for executing this maneuver is at perihelion, the moment of closest approach when orbital velocities are highest and gravitational potential energy is maximum. And here's what should raise eyebrows. 3I/Atlas reaches perihelion while completely obscured from Earth-based observation, hidden behind the sun where no telescope on our planet can monitor what it does. If you wanted to perform a major course change without being detected by whatever technological civilization inhabits the solar system, this would be the perfect moment. Or it could release something. Mini probes, daughter craft, instruments designed to detach during perihelion and use the object's retrograde trajectory to position themselves for close approaches to planets of interest. From 3I/Atlas's position at perihelion, Mars, Earth, and Jupiter are all accessible with relatively minor trajectory adjustments. The timing of planetary alignments, the alignment of 3I/Atlas's orbit with the ecliptic plane, the retrograde motion, all of these characteristics that seem so improbable for a natural object make perfect sense if this is a reconnaissance mission designed to survey multiple worlds during a single pass through the system. Loeb has been careful, some would say provocatively careful, to note the implications if 3I/Atlas maneuvers when it reemerges from behind the sun. The financial markets may crash, he stated in one interview. That's not hyperbole or attention-seeking. That's a sober, calculated assessment of what happens when humanity collectively realizes we are not alone and the visitors appear to possess technology that gives them complete freedom of action within our solar system. Market systems predicated on assumptions of Earth-based economics, resource scarcity, and human exclusivity would face an existential shock. Social structures, religions, geopolitical power dynamics, everything shifts when the fundamental context changes from "we are alone" to "we are observed." But we won't know. Not yet. because between now and early December we are functionally blind. Every telescope on Earth, every space-based observatory, they cannot see objects positioned behind the sun from our perspective. 3i/Atlas is currently in a communication blackout that would be ideal for a spacecraft that didn't want to advertise its next moves to potentially hostile observers. We're flying blind at precisely the moment when the most significant events might be unfolding. The European Space Agency has established a contingency plan, a backup observation strategy that might give us at least partial visibility into what happens at perihelion. Between November 2nd and 25th, the Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer spacecraft JUICE, currently in transit toward its ultimate destination in the Jovian system, will redirect its instruments toward 3i/Atlas. JUICE was never designed to study comets. Its cameras and spectrometers are optimized for icy moons, for detecting subsurface oceans, for analyzing the chemistry of alien water beneath frozen crusts. But those same instruments can observe 3i/Atlas, and critically, because JUICE is positioned between Earth and the Sun along a different geometric line, it has viewing angles we don't have from our planet's surface. If 3i/Atlas develops a massive expanding coma and a classical tail structure after perihelion, indicating natural cometary activity, JUICE will document it. If the object fragments into pieces, JUICE will capture the debris field evolution. And if it does something unexpected, if it maneuvers, if it releases smaller objects, if it exhibits any behavior fundamentally inconsistent with natural cometary evolution, JUICE will record that too with time-stamped, sensor-verified data that cannot be dismissed as observational error or misinterpretation. The data won't be instantaneous. Space communication operates at the speed of light, and JUICE is hundreds of millions of kilometers from home. But by late November, certainly by early December, the information will reach Earth, will be downloaded, processed, analyzed. And at approximately the same time, 3i/Atlas will reemerge into Earth-based telescopic view, allowing independent verification of whatever JUICE observed. December 19th, 2025 is marked on calendars in observatories worldwide. That's when 3i/Atlas makes its closest approach to Earth. Still a safe 1.8 astronomical units away, still no threat to our planet, but close enough that every major observatory will be able to track it with extraordinary precision. Close enough that we can measure its position down to arcseconds, calculate its velocity to fractions of a meter per second, and determine with absolute certainty whether its trajectory matches predictions based purely on gravitational models, or whether something changed. If the orbital numbers match predictions exactly, within the margins of error expected from outgassing and radiation pressure effects, we can cautiously conclude that 3i/Atlas is likely natural, however strange its other characteristics might be. Just another interstellar visitor, peculiar but ultimately explicable, passing through our system and continuing on its way back into the vast dark between stars. But if the trajectory shows deviations, if the orbital elements have shifted in ways that cannot be explained by any natural process, if the object's velocity or direction has changed by amounts that require active propulsion, then every assumption undergirding our understanding of our place in the universe will require fundamental revision. The confession Avi Loeb referenced, the truth that emerges under the stress of perihelion passage, we won't hear it until December. October 2025 finds NASA in the strangest position it's occupied in decades. The agency that put humans on the moon, that built the International Space Station, that landed rovers on Mars and sent probes to the edge of the solar system is now fighting for its survival against an enemy it never trained to face. Not asteroids, not radiation, not the vacuum of space, but politics and budget cuts that threaten to hollow out American space exploration from the inside. The furlough that sent 15,000 NASA employees home on October 3rd wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern that's been accelerating throughout 2025. President Trump's proposed budget for fiscal year 2026 includes devastating cuts to NASA's science programs. The total budget request is $19.6 billion. which sounds substantial until you realize it represents a reduction of almost $1 billion from the previous year. But the real damage is in how those cuts are distributed. The Earth Science Division faces a cut of nearly $700 million, a reduction of 40%. The Planetary Science Division loses $400 million, a 25% cut. Astrophysics drops by $300 million. The message is clear. Science is expendable. Research can wait. Discovery is a luxury we can no longer afford. What does that mean in practice? It means missions that have been planned for years, missions that represent hundreds of millions of dollars already invested, missions that scientists have dedicated their careers to building, could be canceled overnight. The Europa Clipper mission to study Jupiter's potentially habitable moon is already built and sitting in a clean room awaiting launch. Under the proposed budget, it might never fly. The Dragonfly mission to Saturn's moon Titan, selected after rigorous competition and years of preparation, could be terminated before construction even finishes. The National UFO Reporting Center logged over 2,000 UAP sightings in just the first 6 months of 2025. The Pentagon received more than 750 new reports between May 2023 and June 2024. Whatever is happening in our skies is happening with increasing frequency. And it's being witnessed by more and more people using increasingly sophisticated technology. Now connect those dots to 3I Atlas. An object arrives from interstellar space exhibiting 7 statistical impossibilities. Remote viewers describe technology embedded within it months before scientific instruments detect anomalous chemistry. It broadcasts from precisely the location and frequency we'd expect if it were the source of the 1977 WOW signal. It follows a trajectory optimized for planetary reconnaissance. And at the exact moment when we should have received our closest, clearest images of this object, NASA experiences a shutdown. 15,000 employees are sent home. And the high-resolution photographs that could answer fundamental questions remain unreleased months later. Meanwhile, military personnel testify under oath about objects in our own atmosphere that ignore our weapons, violate physics as we understand it, and operate with apparent impunity in some of the most heavily monitored airspace on the planet. The government's response to both situations follows the same pattern. Acknowledge that something happened. Provide minimal information. Offer explanations that don't quite fit the facts. Then stonewall further inquiry under the banner of national security, ongoing investigations, or bureaucratic indifference. Where does this leave us as we move toward December? We're standing at a crossroads between what we thought we knew about the universe and what the evidence is forcing us to consider. 3I Atlas is currently hidden behind the sun, experiencing perihelion, either sublimating like a normal comet or activating like something designed to wake up when bathed in solar energy. We won't know which until it reemerges in early December. But here's what we do know. The anomalies are real. The nickel without iron has been measured by multiple independent instruments. The sunward pointing tail has been photographed by Hubble. The trajectory alignment with the ecliptic and the WOW signal origin has been calculated and confirmed. The silence from space agencies after the Mars flyby is documented and undeniable. These are facts, not speculation. The only question is what those facts mean. Are we looking at a statistical coincidence so unlikely that it strains credibility? Or are we looking at design? Is 3I Atlas a natural object that happens to exhibit characteristics we've never seen before all at once? Or is it something else? Something that's been traveling through our galaxy for billions of years, broadcasting, observing, recording? If you've made it this far in this investigation, I need you to do something important. Leave a comment right now telling me what you honestly think. Is 3I Atlas a comet? Or is it something more? What would it take to convince you one way or the other? And if it turns out to be artificial, if it changes trajectory when it reemerges from behind the sun, How do you think humanity should respond? Hit that like button if you believe transparency matters, if you think governments owe their citizens honest answers about what's happening in our skies, whether those objects come from interstellar space or operate in Earth's atmosphere. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because when 3i Atlas reemerges in December, when those orbital calculations are run, when we finally get answers to questions that have been building since July, you want to be among the first to know. Share this investigation with everyone you know. Post it on social media. Send it to friends and family. We're building a community of people who refuse to accept silence when the evidence demands answers. The mainstream media isn't covering this story with the depth it deserves. Congressional hearings reveal footage of missiles bouncing off unidentified objects, and the news cycle moves on within 48 hours. That's unacceptable. There's another layer to this story, one that makes many scientists uncomfortable, but cannot be ignored if we're committed to examining all available evidence. Throughout human history, across cultures separated by oceans and millennia, there have been accounts of visitors from the sky. Not metaphorical gods or mythological beings, but descriptions that, when stripped of cultural interpretation, sound remarkably like close encounters with advanced technology. The ancient Sumerian texts describe the Anunnaki, beings from the heavens who came to Earth in flying vessels. The Sanskrit epics of India detail Vimanas, flying machines capable of traveling between worlds, powered by mercury vortex engines that sound suspiciously like descriptions of anti-gravity propulsion. The Aboriginal Australians speak of the Wandjina, sky beings who came during the dreamtime and left images of themselves on cave walls wearing what look like helmets or halos. Biblical texts are filled with descriptions that, when read literally rather than allegorically, describe technological encounters. Ezekiel's vision of wheels within wheels, surrounded by eyes, descending from the sky in a pillar of fire. Elijah ascending to heaven in a whirlwind aboard a chariot of fire. The Star of Bethlehem that moved across the sky, stopped, hovered, and marked a specific location with pinpoint precision, behavior that doesn't match any known astronomical phenomenon, but perfectly matches a controlled craft. For centuries, we've interpreted these accounts through religious and mythological frameworks because we had no other context. But what if we've been reading them wrong? What if ancient peoples, lacking the vocabulary and conceptual framework to describe advanced technology, described what they saw using the only references available to them? A spacecraft becomes a chariot of fire. An engine becomes a pillar of cloud by day and fire by night. A being in a protective suit becomes an angel with shining garments. The Harbinger hashtag that's been trending alongside 3i Atlas discussions connects to these ancient accounts. Throughout religious texts, harbingers are messengers who appear before major transformational events. They announce change, judgment, revelation. In the book of Revelation, signs in the heavens precede the transformation of the world. Stars fall from the sky. Objects appear that are described as burning mountains cast into the sea. Now, I'm not suggesting 3i Atlas is literally a biblical prophecy fulfilled. What I am suggesting is that if an advanced civilization wanted to monitor a developing species, if they wanted to observe our technological and social evolution without direct interference, sending automated probes that arrive periodically over thousands or millions of years would be an effective strategy. Those probes might arrive during key moments in our development. During the agricultural revolution, when we first formed permanent settlements. During the Industrial Revolution, when we harnessed fossil fuels and mechanization. During the Atomic Age, when we split the atom and developed weapons capable of planetary destruction. And now, during the Information Age, as we're on the cusp of becoming a spacefaring civilization ourselves, reaching beyond our own planet to establish permanent presence on other worlds. If that sounds far-fetched, consider what we ourselves are planning. The Breakthrough Starshot Initiative, backed by scientists like Stephen Hawking before his death, proposes sending thousands of tiny light-sail probes to Alpha Centauri, our nearest star system. These probes would be accelerated to 20% of light speed using powerful lasers, making the journey in about 20 years. Once there, they'd photograph any planets, measure atmospheric composition, look for signs of life, and beam the data back to Earth. We're planning to do exactly what I'm suggesting might have been done to us. Send robotic observers to nearby star systems to study them from a distance. If we're contemplating this with our current primitive technology, imagine what a civilization even a few hundred years more advanced might accomplish. Now scale that up to a civilization thousands or millions of years ahead of us. The physicist Enrico Fermi famously asked, "Where is everybody? If intelligent life is common in the universe, if civilizations arise regularly throughout the galaxy, why haven't we seen clear evidence of them?" The question spawned dozens of proposed solutions to what's now called the Fermi paradox. Maybe intelligent life is extremely rare. Maybe civilizations destroy themselves before achieving interstellar travel. Maybe the galaxy is too vast and travel too slow for civilizations to ever meet. Maybe advanced civilizations hide deliberately, avoiding contact with younger species. Or maybe they're here, and we're just now developing the technology and perspective to notice. Maybe they've always been here, observing, recording, occasionally revealing themselves just enough to be noticed by those paying attention, but never so obviously that their presence becomes undeniable to the masses. That would explain the pattern we're seeing. Military encounters with objects demonstrating impossible capabilities, objects that appear on radar and infrared but seem to violate our understanding of physics. Objects that have been reported for decades but never quite definitively proven because the evidence always stops just short of irrefutable. And it would explain 3I Atlas, an object designed to look natural from a distance, encased in ice that makes it indistinguishable from the countless comets drifting through space. But up close, when examined with sophisticated instruments, the disguise starts to crack. Chemical signatures that don't match natural processes. Physics that don't quite work the way they should. A trajectory too perfect, timing too convenient, characteristics too improbable to accept as coincidence. December 2025 will be remembered as either the month humanity's search for extraterrestrial intelligence finally succeeded, or the month we dodged a bullet we didn't even know was coming. There is no middle ground. Either 3I Atlas is what mainstream science cautiously suggests, a very unusual but ultimately natural comet, or it's something that will force us to completely reconsider our place in the cosmos. Let's walk through both scenarios in detail because the implications of each are profound. Scenario 1. Natural but extraordinary. 3I Atlas reemerges from behind the Sun in early December, exactly where gravitational calculations predict it should be. Its brightness has increased dramatically due to perihelion heating, developing a spectacular coma and tail visible from Earth with binoculars or small telescopes. Observatories worldwide track it with precision, measuring its position, velocity, and trajectory. The numbers match predictions within expected margins of error, accounting for outgassing and radiation pressure. The JUICE spacecraft's observations from late November confirm massive cometary activity. Images show a classical comet structure with symmetrical outgassing, a proper tail pointing away from the Sun, and behavior consistent with volatile sublimation under solar heating. The object is fragmenting, breaking into pieces as thermal stresses overcome its structural integrity, giving astronomers an unprecedented opportunity to study the internal composition of an interstellar comet. NASA and ESA finally released the high-resolution images from the Mars flyby. The photographs show an irregular nucleus, lumpy and potato-shaped like other comet nuclei we've studied. Surface variations are visible, brighter patches of ice, mixed with darker regions of dust and rock. Nothing geometric, nothing artificial, just a comet, albeit an unusual one. Scientists publish papers explaining the anomalies. The nickel without iron signature resulted from a previously unknown chemical pathway involving exotic ice chemistry that only occurs under specific conditions. The sunward-pointing tail was indeed caused by ice fragment dynamics, exactly as Loeb and Keating's model proposed. The polarization signature reflects unusual dust grain properties that expand our understanding of comet diversity. The trajectory alignment and planetary timing were statistical flukes, improbable but not impossible. The WOW signal connection was coincidence. In 1977, 3I Atlas was in approximately the right region of sky, but the signal actually came from something else entirely. Perhaps a brief flare from a magnetar, a highly magnetized neutron star we didn't detect until recently. Perhaps a passing satellite reflecting radio emissions in an unexpected way. Perhaps something else we haven't thought of yet, but definitely not an alien transmission from an artificial object that just happened to arrive in our solar system 48 years later. In this scenario, the silence from space agencies wasn't a cover-up. It was caution. Scientists wanted to be absolutely certain of their findings before going public. They wanted to rule out every possible alternative explanation before making claims about an interstellar visitor. The government shutdown during the Mars flyby was genuinely unfortunate timing. Nothing more. And the remote viewers? Wrong. The human mind is pattern-seeking. When given limited information and asked to describe something unknown, people unconsciously fill in gaps with expectations and imagination. Bertie Jaworski perceived technology aboard 3I Atlas because she knew it was unusual, and her mind constructed a narrative that fit the mystery. This scenario preserves everything we think we know about the universe. It confirms that we are still alone, at least in this small corner of the galaxy, at least for now. 3I Atlas becomes another entry in the catalog of interstellar objects, unusual and worthy of study, but ultimately explicable within the framework of natural processes. Life continues as before. Scenario 2. The universe changes forever. 3I Atlas reemerges from behind the sun in early December, but not where it's supposed to be. The orbital calculations show a deviation, small but unmistakable, that cannot be explained by outgassing or any known natural force. The object has changed course. Velocity has increased or decreased by amounts that require active propulsion. The trajectory has shifted, pointing no longer out of the solar system but inward, toward the inner planets. JUICE's observations show no massive cometary outburst. The coma has actually decreased despite perihelion heating. The object appears more compact, more solid. Thermal imaging reveals heat signatures inconsistent with simple solar absorption. Parts of the surface are warmer than they should be, suggesting internal power generation. Spectroscopic analysis shows the nickel emissions have intensified dramatically, following that exponential power law curve, but now other elements are appearing too. Exotic materials that don't exist in nature. Isotopic ratios that don't match any known stellar nucleosynthesis process. NASA releases the Mars flyby images, and they show something that breaks every assumption. Not a fuzzy comet nucleus, but structure. Geometric patterns beneath a partially sublimated ice shell. Surface features that look manufactured, not natural. Dimensions that suggest intentional design, not random accretion. Radio telescopes detect a signal, not the random noise of natural electromagnetic emissions, but a pattern. Repeating, structured. Broadcasting at 1420.4 MHz, the hydrogen line, the same frequency as the WOW signal from 1977. The signal is encoded, carrying information we can detect but not yet interpret. It's not directed at us specifically. It's omnidirectional, a beacon announcing presence to anyone listening. In this scenario, everything changes. Every government on Earth convenes emergency sessions. The United Nations holds crisis meetings behind closed doors. Intelligence agencies that have been tracking UAP for decades suddenly find their classified files no longer classifiable. The public demands answers to questions nobody's prepared to answer. Financial markets react exactly as Avi Loeb predicted. Panic selling as investors realize the fundamental assumptions underlying global economics, assumptions of Earth-based resource scarcity, human exclusivity, technological superiority, no longer hold. If there's technology out there advanced enough to cross interstellar space, advanced enough to survive billions of years, advanced enough to operate autonomously with capabilities we can barely comprehend, then every calculation about the future becomes obsolete. Religious institutions fracture. Some embrace the discovery as confirmation that we're part of a larger creation. Others reject it as deception, a test of faith. Still others experience existential crises as doctrines built on human centrality to divine purpose suddenly seem provincial, parochial, embarrassingly limited in scope. Scientists split into factions. Those who want immediate, aggressive attempts at communication. Those who advocate caution, pointing out that we have no idea whether contact would be beneficial or catastrophic. Those who argue we should do nothing, that any civilization capable of crossing interstellar space could destroy us effortlessly if they wanted to, so our actions are irrelevant. The military establishments of major powers quietly mobilize. Not for war against Earth-based adversaries, but contingency planning for scenarios nobody's truly prepared for. How do you defend against technology you don't understand? How do you negotiate when you don't know what the other party wants or even whether they perceive you as sentient beings worth negotiating with? And through it all, 3i Atlas continues its journey, broadcasting its signal, following its new trajectory, doing whatever it was designed to do. Observing us, recording our response, sending data back to wherever it came from, transmitted across light years to a civilization that sent it here so long ago that human ancestors were still learning to make stone tools. Which scenario unfolds? We don't know. Not yet. The math will tell us. When 3i Atlas reemerges in December, when telescopes lock onto its position, when the calculations are run comparing observed location to predicted location, the deviation will be either within margins of error or outside them. There's no ambiguity. Either the orbit matches gravitational models or it doesn't. If it matches, we breathe easier. Another mystery, another unusual object, but the universe remains comprehensible. If it doesn't match, if the numbers show something that requires propulsion, intentional course change, active maneuvering, then humanity enters a new era. The era when we confirmed we're not alone. Personally, and this is my opinion based on reviewing all available evidence, I lean toward scenario 1. I think 3i Atlas is probably natural. I think the anomalies have explanations we haven't fully worked out yet, but explanations that don't require abandoning natural processes. I think the silence from space agencies reflects scientific caution, not conspiracy. I think the coincidences, however improbable, are still more likely than an alien probe arriving in our solar system precisely when we have the technology to detect and study it. But I'm not certain. Nobody can be certain. And that uncertainty, that gap between what we know and what we fear or hope, that's where we live right now. Suspended between October and December, between observation and revelation, between the universe we thought we inhabited and the universe we might be about to discover. Chapter 12. Living in the Gap, What We Do While We Wait. So what do we do during these months of uncertainty? We watch, we wait, we gather data, and we prepare for either outcome. Astronomers worldwide have coordinated observation campaigns for December. When 3i Atlas reemerges, it will be the most thoroughly documented object in the history of solar system studies. Professional observatories, amateur astronomers, space-based telescopes, even crowdsourced data from thousands of individual observers, all feeding into databases that will be analyzed with unprecedented rigor. Radio telescopes continue monitoring. SETI projects that normally scan distant stars have redirected efforts toward 3I Atlas's predicted position. If there's a signal, if there's any electromagnetic emission that deviates from natural expectations, it will be detected. Planetary defense networks track the object's projected path. Even if it maneuvers, even if it changes course toward Earth, we'll know well in advance. At current velocities and distances, any course change would take months to bring 3I Atlas into threatening proximity. That gives time for additional observations, for international coordination, for decisions about how to respond. Meanwhile, scientists prepare papers. Regardless of outcome, this object represents valuable data. If it's natural, it tells us about interstellar comet composition, about the chemical and physical processes occurring in other planetary systems, about the mechanisms that fling objects into interstellar space. If it's artificial, well, that's an entirely different set of papers, probably the most important scientific publications in human history. The public, those paying attention at least, remains divided. Online communities debate endlessly. Some are convinced 3I Atlas is alien technology and view the government silence as confirmation of cover-up. Others dismiss the entire thing as overactive imaginations seeing patterns in noise, no different from seeing faces in clouds. Social media amplifies both sides. Algorithms reward engagement, and nothing drives engagement like controversy and uncertainty. Videos analyzing 3I Atlas accumulate millions of views. Channels dedicated to UFO phenomena experience subscriber surges. Mainstream news outlets run occasional pieces, usually framed as scientists puzzled by mysterious comet, carefully avoiding any suggestion of non-natural origins while leaving enough ambiguity to keep audiences interested. And beneath all of this, beneath the speculation and analysis and debate, there's a deeper current, a sense that we're living through a moment that might matter, that might actually change things. In an age of information overload, where thousands of stories compete for attention every day, where genuine significance often gets drowned out by manufactured outrage and trivial drama, 3I Atlas feels different, feels important. Whether it ultimately proves to be the most significant discovery of our generation or just another unusual space object that gets forgotten once the next crisis captures headlines. Right now, in October 2025, it represents possibility. The possibility that we're not alone. The possibility that intelligence exists beyond Earth. The possibility that contact might actually happen in our lifetimes. And that possibility, that hope or fear depending on your perspective, that's what keeps people watching the skies, checking for updates, waiting for December. We've covered an enormous amount of ground in this investigation. 7 statistical impossibilities that make 3I Atlas unlike any object we've encountered. Chemical signatures that defy natural explanation. Remote viewing testimonies describing technology before scientific instruments detected anomalies. Congressional hearings revealing military footage of objects that survive missile strikes and continue flying. NASA shutdowns at precisely the wrong moment. Missing high-resolution images that should have been released months ago. The silence. The patterns. The coincidences that strain credulity. I don't know what 3I Atlas is. Nobody knows, not yet. But I know the questions surrounding it are legitimate. I know the data doesn't add up neatly. I know the official explanations leave gaps large enough to drive uncertainty through. And I know that transparency matters. Whether this object is a comet or a probe, whether it's natural or designed, the public has a right to see the data collected by instruments paid for with tax dollars. We have a right to review the Mars orbiter images. We have a right to understand why 15,000 NASA employees were sent home during the most important observation opportunity. We have a right to demand answers when military personnel testify under oath about objects exhibiting capabilities that violate known physics. Democracy requires informed citizens. Science requires transparency and reproducibility. Both are undermined when information is withheld, when legitimate questions go unanswered, when patterns of secrecy become normalized. So here's what I'm asking you to do. If you've watched this entire investigation, if you've stuck with me through 2.5 hours of deep analysis, you clearly care about understanding what's happening above our heads. Don't let that interest fade. Stay engaged. Keep asking questions. Demand transparency from institutions that claim to serve the public interest. Leave a comment right now. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what you think 3i Atlas really is. Tell me what would convince you one way or the other. And most importantly, tell me this: I made it to the end. That's what I want to see in the comments. Thousands of you saying, I made it to the end. Proving that there's an audience for deep, serious investigation into these questions. Proving that not everything has to be reduced to sound bites and clickbait. Proving that people still care about truth, even when truth is complicated and uncertain. Hit that like button. It matters more than you might think. YouTube's algorithm rewards engagement, and the more likes this video gets, the more people it reaches. Every like is a vote for serious investigation over superficial coverage. Every like helps this content compete against the endless stream of trivial garbage fighting for attention. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. When 3i Atlas reemerges in December, when the orbital calculations are run, when we finally know whether the trajectory changed or stayed true to predictions, I'll be here with immediate analysis. You want to be among the first to know. Share this investigation everywhere. Post it on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Discord, wherever you communicate online. Send it directly to friends and family who care about space, science, government transparency, or just understanding the world we live in. This content thrives on word of mouth because mainstream algorithms often suppress anything that challenges official narratives or asks uncomfortable questions. And finally, watch the next video that appears on your screen. I've prepared additional content diving even deeper into specific aspects of this story. The mathematics of interstellar travel. The history of remote viewing in intelligence operations. The legal frameworks governing disclosure of UAP information. Each video builds on what you've learned here. We're living in extraordinary times. Asteroids sneak past our defenses. Rovers find possible fossils on Mars. Military encounters with unidentified objects get declassified and presented to Congress. The sun erupts with activity that paints our skies with auroras. Comets blaze green across October nights. And somewhere beyond our ability to observe, hidden behind the glare of our star, an interstellar visitor experiences the heat of perihelion and either sublimates like ice or activates like technology designed to wake up when bathed in solar energy. December will bring answers. Until then, we watch, we wait, we question, we demand transparency, and we refuse to accept silence when the evidence demands investigation. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for caring about truth in an age when truth seems increasingly difficult to find. This community, everyone watching this video, everyone engaging in comments, everyone sharing and discussing and demanding answers, you're the reason this work matters. Stay curious. Stay skeptical. Stay engaged. And I'll see you in December when 3i Atlas shows us what it really is.